Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great episode for you today. I'm so excited. We're going to go straight into an interview today, and I'm so pleased to be joined by the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith, thank you so much for joining the program. It's great to have you.
My pleasure, and congratulations on your new venture. I'm looking forward to seeing it grow.
Thank you so much, Premier. Okay, so I want to talk about your recent diplomacy and your advocacy. Typically, the Premier of Alberta wouldn't be a diplomat going down to foreign capitals and advocating on behalf of the country. But frankly, you have done a better job. Our viewers and our subscribers tell me that they feel like you represent Canadians more than any other federal leader on the stage. So I'm wondering, Premier, if you could take us behind the scenes a little bit to your recent trip to Mar-a-Lago. You were down in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. I believe you were there again last week with the other premiers. So tell me, what was it like to meet President Trump? And what do you think has been the most impactful and productive of these meetings?
I had an opportunity to go to Mar-a-Lago at the invitation of Kevin O'Leary. And so we were able to be at a table that was right next to the president. And then the next day went to a golf club and went to many, many inauguration events when I was down there. And then you're right, also returned just last week to be there with the premiers. And this is the first time all 13 premiers have been down. So I think that part of the reason is that what I've observed is that if we're going to be able to have somebody at the table to go toe-to-toe in negotiations, we need someone with a 4-year mandate. We have a prime minister who's going to be there another 17 days, followed by another prime minister who may be there another 30 days or longer, followed by, after an election, perhaps a third prime minister. And so if we want to maintain the diplomatic relationship and start building those ties, it's really going to fall to those of us who do have a mandate and who do have relationships with governors and members of Congress to have some influence on the people who are assisting the president in his decision making. What I would say about what I've learned in the trips that I have taken is that I think this is a president who's going to be making a lot of the decisions of his administration directly. And maybe that's not going to surprise anyone after seeing his first few weeks on the job with the number of executive orders that he's written before he's had a cabinet in place without having to put legislation through Congress. I think he's going to be the kind of president who does a lot of these kind of executive orders. And what we need to do is make sure that those who share our common interest are armed with the information so that they can influence his decision making. And that's part of what I've done. Is why I've built relationships with the Secretaries of Energy and Interior, various members of the Senate, other governors who are influential on the president. And I'm beginning to see some signs that our message is breaking through.
Well, that's great. One of the interesting tidbits that I learned in reading a Calgary Herald column written by Rick Bell was he said that the evening that you met President Trump, he was in the ballroom, there's hundreds of people there. Everyone wants to talk to the president. And President Trump walked into the room, this is according to the recounting by Rick Bell, and he said that President Trump beelined to you, that he was so keen and so interested in talking to you and pleased to meet you, that he went right to you. And I think that really shows, Premier, how serious he is about trying to improve the relationships with Canada and trying to make a deal with us.
Well, I had let a few members of the administration know that I was going to be there, and so they put in a word to let the president know, and I was pleased that he was able to come over and share a few words. What I wanted to know, because we had heard a lot of discussion in the press about, I think he had just recently said, we don't need Canada, we don't need your autos, we don't need your timber, we don't need your oil and gas. And I thought, well, is that really true? Does he really not want our oil and gas? And I wanted to get to the bottom of whether or not that was the case. So I asked him pretty frankly, do you want to buy more oil and gas from Canada? And he told me yes. So that says to me that whatever our current issues that we have with the president are, I think that we can begin the discussion once again of how Canada can assist with American energy dominance. I think that's one of the messages that was well received and clearly got through. And I'll give you an example of why I think that's the case, is when you look at the initial tariff that was being threatened to come in, I believe it was February 4th, it was to apply 25% across the board. But some of our allies, whether it was within the administration or the American Petroleum Institute or the refiners were able to make the case that America benefits from being able to get oil and gas at a discount so that they can upgrade it in their refineries and provide low-cost energy to Americans, and then also be able to export their WTI internationally. One of the arguments I've made is the Americans consume about 21 million barrels a day of oil, and they only produce 13 million barrels a day. So they need to get the rest from somewhere else. And if you're looking for heavy oil, there's not a lot of good places to get it from. They can get it from Venezuela and Iraq and Iran, or they can get it from us. And so I think that argument had some resonance. But when you look at how we wrote up the order as well, that would have provided a lower tariff, it wasn't just oil and gas, it was energy resources, which he has defined in his declaration of an energy emergency to include critical minerals. Every province has critical minerals. It includes electricity. Many of our provinces also export electricity. So if we can make that argument and be successful, I think we can be successful on a number of fronts. We can make the same argument about our integrated food system, the same argument about how they can benefit from timber to create lower lumber prices, to have a cheaper housing, and how we can talk about intermediate goods like auto parts as a way of being able to lend themselves to building out the U.S. auto industry. So I think we just have to be prepared to make the argument directly, have advocates in the United States, make friends, and hopefully chip by chip be able to have that kind of influence so that we can continue to enjoy this tariff-free relationship.
So I love that approach, and I think that is the way to go. But it seems, Premier, that so many people, particularly federal politicians, have taken Trump's words. And yes, he uses very bombastic terms like this idea that Canada would be the 51st state, or that there's going to be some kind of annexation. They take that very literally and sort of use it as a kind of a wedge issue in politics to say that, this is a serious threat. The Americans are our enemies now, and Canada needs to stand up against this. I don't see that approach from you at all, and I'm wondering, what do you think? Do you think Trump is literal when he says that he wants Canada to be the 51st state?
I don't know what his intention is. When I spoke with Dominic LeBlanc, who was at that initial table in Mar-a-Lago when they went down with the Prime Minister, he said it was accepted by the table as a joke. Everyone laughed at the time, but the fact that it keeps getting repeated, it becomes less funny with each repetition. And as you can clearly see that Canadians are getting frustrated with being disrespected. I mean, I don't like seeing the U.S. national anthem booed at hockey games. I think the national anthem is there to honor our veterans, men and women in uniform who fight for our countries. And we fought many, many wars and shed a lot of blood with our American compatriots. So I don't like seeing that. And that's been kind of the outcome that has resulted from that. But what I do think is that the positive side of Canadians deciding to come together has been, look at what has changed. We now have politicians of all stripes talking about building pipelines, east and west and north. We've talked about accelerating our own permitting process so that we can develop our critical minerals. We've talked about tearing down all of the interprovincial trade barriers and creating comprehensive mutual recognition agreements so that we can trade more with each other than we do with our southern neighbors. So I think that the fact that we've had a positive outcome with us really taking stock of what it means to be Canadian, that I think is important. I think it makes us stronger. I think we can turn it to the positive. I think we can find new markets. And I think we have to be prepared to do that. I don't know if this recalibration with this president is going to be a short-term issue, or if it's going to be something that lasts his entire presidency, or if it's going to be something that if there is a Republican presidency to follow, that this might be the new reality of dealing with our American neighbor for the next decade or more. But if that is the case, then we've got to take some action to ensure that we've got diversified markets, that we are also able to trade more with each other than we are with our southern neighbor. And I think that that's going to be a very healthy conversation for us to have.
I want to ask you because we've heard from several leading sort of academics more on the conservative side, people like Jordan Peterson. He had a great op-ed or essay in the National Post basically saying that Canada has to respect Alberta more because maybe Trump can offer something more than what you're getting in Canada. Bruce Pardy, professor at Queen's, has written something similar. And we had David Haskell, a professor from Wilfrid Laurier, on the show yesterday. And he talked about the idea that Alberta's not getting a very good deal in Canada right now. And maybe perhaps Trump and the Americans can offer something more appealing to Americans. Surveys show up almost 50% of young men would take American citizenship if offered to them. I think the number is highest in Alberta in terms of people who would be interested in this. Do you take the idea seriously at all?
I can tell you why people feel that way, because I know that the federal government likes to say, oh, well, Trans Mountain Pipeline got built and Coastal GasLink got built. And those two things are very true. But you know what both of those do demonstrate is just how much stronger we are when we're able to build those kinds of big projects to have more diversified markets. And it was not easy getting there. And in fact, yes, we got those two built, but we had 176 billion in proposed projects that got canceled. Multiple LNG projects, Northern Gateway, which would have been the most important pipeline to get a Canadian product international, the Energy East pipeline, which would have helped to support energy security and independence for Ontario and Quebec, rather than having to rely on the U.S. for and international for most of their product. When Keystone got canceled, we didn't have any defense from our national level of government. Big oil sands projects like Teck's Frontier Mine also got canceled. So these are the things that really cut to Albertans, is the number of ways in which the federal government has interfered with our ability to develop our resources and get them to market. And the fact that we're now having a new conversation is important, because one of the reasons why I took great umbrage to the various politicians musing about throwing an export tax on Alberta exports as a way of generating revenue for Ottawa is, it's how dare you, after everything that you have done to try to kill this industry, keep it in the ground, tax us out of existence, regulate us out of existence, now think that it's some kind of a playing chip to play when it's convenient. That is just not going to be on in Alberta. The reason why we sell so much product to the United States is because our neighbors in other provinces wouldn't let us sell it to them. And I've been very clear about that if we actually want to change the way this country works, part of it comes down to, let's build these big nation building projects. Let's build pipelines, transmission lines, and let's support each other in getting products to market. And I'm pleased to see that we're beginning to have that conversation. It's one that's overdue.
Well, I want to bring in Mark Carney into the conversation, because it looks like he's going to be the new prime minister selected by Liberal insiders to lead the country. And he has long believed, he wrote a book in 2021 called Values, very committed to the green agenda, very committed to the concept of carbon tax. I think that carbon taxes aren't politically popular right now. So even Liberal leader candidates are saying that they would do away with them. But then Mark Carney says that he would propose an industrial carbon tax as well. So how do you think Mark Carney plays into this equation? And do you think that will hurt, or will it benefit the discussion with President Trump and that administration?
Well, I don't know. I keep hearing that the Liberals are a feminist party. There's 3 women running. Don't you think that maybe one of the women might be chosen as the successor?
Maybe, yeah.
All kidding aside, Mark Carney is no friend of Alberta. He is the architect of the net zero banking policy and alliance, which was designed to stop funding oil and gas projects. It was designed to stop insurance companies from insuring oil and gas projects. The offensive agenda that we have, whether it's emissions caps or net zero electricity regs, all generate from Mark Carney, who's been pushing that agenda for a long period of time. So if you think that I would meet the potential of his leadership with any enthusiasm, let me tell you, I think he'd be even worse than what we see out of Justin Trudeau and Stephen Guilbeault, because he's been the one who has been advocating for these policies internationally and causing us such great harm. So that's going to require, I think any politician now who aspires to lead this country has to realize that there's certain things that are not on. accelerating and inflating the price of energy, which is making everything more expensive for everyone, from groceries to home heating to home electricity. That is not on anymore. Punishing one region of the country out of some ideology that is being led by international bodies, that is not on anymore. Pitting one province against the other, not on anymore. And so I don't know if the Liberals are going to be able to shift in their perspective, or if that particular leadership candidate will be able to shift in his perspective. But you shouldn't be surprised to hear me say that the political leader that most aligns with the aspirations of Albertans is actually Pierre Poilievre. And I think that the kind of commentary he's talking about, making us proud to be Canadian again, saying we need a new trading partner, each other. Those are the kind of things that we all want to hear. That's really where I think Canadians are at right now.
Well, I think one sort of silver lining of this all is that suddenly everybody wants more interprovincial trade. Everyone's for pipelines. I want to ask you a final question, because we had Mark Carney last week in Kelowna speaking to an audience, and he said that he would take any measure possible to grow the economy, to get projects done. He even said he would use the Emergencies Act if necessary to get pipelines built. And then a few days later, he was speaking on French CBC, and he was asked by the host, would you force Quebec to have a pipeline? Mark Carney said never. He said never 4 times in the interview. So he is literally the oldest trick in the book, speaking one thing in Western Canada in English and saying the exact opposite thing in the course of a week, the exact opposite thing to the French audience in Quebec. What do you think about Quebec and the idea that they can veto national projects, and that a Liberal Prime Minister wouldn't use the powers to try to encourage that to happen?
Well, I'm glad he got busted on that, because you can't do that. You can't promise one thing in one part of the country and another in another part of the country just to be popular and try to sneak in to getting elected. So if he keeps doing that, I hope that you and the independent media keep calling him out on that. But I would say that my conversations in Quebec, and I always joke with Premier Legault every time I see him. I keep telling him, every time I see you, I'm going to encourage you to develop your own vast natural gas resources so that you can not only feed your own people with a solid supply, but you can also export it internationally. And I can assure you that I raise it with him every time. I think the conversation with Quebec has to maybe start from a different point. What were the reasons why there was such opposition to Energy East? And part of it was that it was going through Montreal, which may well be, aside from Vancouver, the most progressive, a green-oriented municipality that we have in the entire country. So is there a path of lesser resistance? Could we look at a different route? Could we go up to Quebec City? Or Baie-Comeau? Is there other places that we can find a route that satisfies Quebecers' concerns about some of the environmental issues, but also allows them to meet their energy needs? That's the challenge that I'm putting out to the industry, is let's find a route, let's find a corridor, let's find a way that we can talk about it from an area of mutual interest. Maybe we need to be looking at how Indigenous bands are going to able to own a portion of a pipeline like that so that they can get a revenue stream. Maybe Quebec needs to build a new refinery so that they can get the benefits of those upgrading jobs, which they already have in Montreal. Maybe those are the ways that we should start having the conversation this time, is talking about mutual benefit. And maybe we might get further next time around. That's what I'm hoping to do. Is I don't think that there should be a veto. I think that we are well past that. If we're going to be a country, we have to start acting like a country. But that also means trying to find a way to identify the issues that are causing the conflict and see if we can resolve them. And I'm committed to trying to do that.
Excellent. Well, I just final thing, Premier Smith. I saw a clip of you speaking French, and it had a lot of people wondering: does Premier Smith have federal aspirations? Is there any chance that you're going to get into federal politics one day?
There isn't, but I'll tell you one of my grave concerns. One of my grave concerns is that I see the rise of the Bloc Québécois federally, and I see the rise of the Parti Québécois provincially. And I want to be able to monitor what is being said in Quebec, so that if there are any misconceptions or misapprehensions about how Alberta feels about Quebec, or the ways in which we want to work with Quebec, that we can correct those. So I don't know if I'll ever be fluent enough to be able to speak to Francophones in their own language, but I think it is important for us, especially now when we're facing a potential threat from the United States that is causing disunity. I don't want to see a threat from the Bloc and the Parti Québécois causing disunity as well. So that's part of what I'm preparing for. There's going to be an election there in 2026, and if I can do my part to help communicate Alberta's view and why it is we think we're stronger together, and why I think that we need to cooperate on some of these big issues, I want to be able to do that.
Excellent. Well, Premier Smith, thank you so much for joining the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Candice.
And wow, we were so lucky to have the Premier on. Really enjoyed that interview, and I hope you did too, folks. Okay, we've got a few more news stories that I would like to get to today. It's Fake News Friday. We used to do Fake News Friday every week on the show, but we've been so busy. Last week we had Pierre Poilievre on Friday, and this week we had Danielle Smith on, but I will get to some of it a little bit later in the show. First, I want to talk about the hockey. I want to talk about the updates with the game last night with Canada and the US facing off in the Four Nations final. So we talked about it earlier in the week. There was a game in Montreal. The fans booed. I don't like it. I think it's disgraceful when hockey fans boo national anthems, because you're not just booing the politics. You're not just, saying you are displeased with the leadership of the country. You're disrespecting everybody in the country, including the brave men who fought and died for our freedoms, for our collective freedoms in Canada and the United States. We need to respect one another, and it goes both ways. So last night, the game was in Boston at the TD Garden. I do like to note that the arena in Boston is called the TD Garden. I don't know if they know that their arena is named after Toronto Dominion Bank, but I had a good chuckle at that one. Anyway, the stakes were pretty high, and we saw a lot of politicians weighing in. A lot of it was in good fun. I like this kind of good faith, good fun, back and forth. So you had, before the game, Texas Senator Ted Cruz posted this on X: "Winner gets to keep Canada. Deal, Senator Cruz." We should have taken the deal because, you probably know who won the game. Ted Cruz, by the way, born in Calgary. So I think he's cheering for the wrong team there, Senator Cruz. But anyways, he says winner keeps Canada. In a pregame interview with YouTuber and commentator Benny Johnson, Vice President J.D. Vance responded, and here is what he had to say.
Canada made the mistake of booing Team USA, and then they got their asses kicked. Team USA,
fantastic.
Canada again today, rematch.
Yep.
A message of encouragement for Team USA versus Canada.
Absolutely. Well, we'd like you to kick their asses again because you don't boo the United States of America. And to Canada, if you guys don't win, the tariffs are even higher. No, I'm kidding. I kid.
Good fun there. And I like the back and forth barbs. I think it's fun. It's part of the game. And don't boo the national anthem, folks. We booed their anthem, so I think we kind of had it coming. At a press conference in Toronto yesterday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was asked by True North's own Noah Jarvis what we should be focusing on and whether or not he liked the fact that the Canadians were booing the national anthem. Here's what that looked like.
At the next Four Nations face-off match and at future sporting events, should Canadians boo the American anthem or refrain from doing so?
I would focus on cheering on Canadians. I want Canadians to win. I enjoyed the game. Unfortunately, did not enjoy the outcome when I sat down with my little boy, Cruz. It was his first in-person hockey game, and my wife, Anna, was there. My retirement plan is for little Cruz to become an NHL hockey player. So we wanted to get him started early on that. I would just encourage everyone to remember that our disagreement is not with the American people, it's with the American president's unjustified threats of tariffs. And let's focus on building our own country up.
So we should all be friends, guys. Let's just all be friends. And of course, the Americans gave it right back. So the national anthem was played. It was played by Grammy Award-winning Canadian singer Chantal Kreviazuk. Remember her? She performed the national anthem. I'm going to play the clip, and I want you to take specific notice to the lyrics, because Chantal Kreviazuk decided to change the lyrics of "O Canada," which in and of itself is a absolutely disgraceful, disrespectful sign to the Canadian people, okay? So it's bad enough that we have the Americans booing our national anthem, which they did, which I don't like. I didn't like when the Canadians did it. I don't like it when the Americans do it. A little bit of tit for tat. I'm not saying that it's unwarranted because we kind of deserve it, guys. They did it. We did it to them. They do it to us. But also pay attention to the lyrics that were sung here. Let's play that clip.
Oh, Canada, terre nostarieux, true patriot love that only us command.
So she says, in true patriot love that only us command. Those aren't the words. Those aren't the lyrics. But she decided to change it. I guess that was a little protest saying that only us command, only we get to command our country. In other words, not you, President Trump. Look, I don't like this. I don't like it when they change the national anthem. Remember, the Canadian tenors did it way back then to make some point about Black Lives Matter or something, and it basically finished them their career as performing artists because we don't like that, right? The national anthem is supposed to be dignified, and the only reason I give Chantal Kreviazuk a little bit of rope here and credit here is because Trudeau already kind of ruined this part of the national anthem, right? Remember, for over a century, English Canadians sang this song, and we sang "In All Thy Son's Command," right? When I go to a hockey game, I still sing "In All Thy Son's Command." I teach my children the original lyrics, "In All Thy Son's Command." They changed it several years ago, one of the first acts of the Trudeau government, and they changed it because apparently "All Thy Son's Command" was sexist, so they changed it to "In All of Us Command," which just sounds bad. And so Chantal Kreviazuk changed from "All of Us Command" to "Only Thy Command." Lame, terrible, not good. Okay, let's get back to the game because it was actually a great game. It was a great game. It was very, very exciting. And it ended up with Canada defeating the Americans 3-2 in overtime. Doesn't this bring you back to the 2010 Olympics when Sidney Crosby scored the gold medal goal in overtime? Well, this time around, it was none other than Connor McDavid, one of the great young or current Canadian hockey players, one of the greatest Canadian hockey players of all time, certainly one of the best in the NHL today for the Edmonton Oilers. Here he is scoring the game-winning goal.
And off the drop, McDavid went forward and nearly got a shot on. McCarr sends it around. Marner waiting. Connor McDavid scores! Connor McDavid for Canada!
There's nothing better than watching a Canadian score the game-winning goal in overtime against the Americans. Take that. So yes, Ted Cruz, we will keep Canada. Thank you very much. And so after the game, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrote the following on X. I don't like Trudeau, but I did like this. He wrote, "You can't take our country and you can't take our game." Boom, take that. Americans. Mark Carney, not so well, didn't do so well. Mark Carney posted the following on X. He says, "Yeah, baby, Mac D, the Messiah." What? What? Does anybody call Connor McDavid Mac D? I've never heard that before. And of course, he didn't even spell McDavid properly. It's not Mac D with an A. It's just McD. So nice try there. It's kind of funny because, there's a lot of consternation about Donald Trump and his use of social media. People say, he's on there late at night tweeting crazy things with all caps and exclamation points. Sean, if we could put that tweet back up. But Mark Carney, who's supposed to be the strong, stable hand for Canada, the professional banker man coming in to take over our country. 11:30 p.m., you got the all caps, the several exclamation points, the misspelt MacD, the Messiah, the lame hashtag. I don't know. This is seeming kind of Trumpian to me. I don't think that was quite the message that Mark Carney or perhaps his intern, I don't know who's managing the X account there, but not a very good message. Of course, gets roasted in the comment section, which is all pretty hilarious. Okay, I want to move on here and talk about the Liberals. We talked about it earlier in the week. They're on their way out. Trudeau has maybe 2 weeks left in office, and he's going to spend all the money he can on the way out the door, announcing a ridiculous bullet train project that I promise you will not get built. And if it does, it won't come in a budget at $3 billion. It's going to cost 10 or maybe 100 times that to build what Trudeau proposed. That's not the only thing they're promising on their way out the door. So here we have the National Post. Liberals want to nearly double CBC funding as an investment in national security. So the Liberals are proposing to increase the CBC's budget from the current $33.66 per Canadian up to $62 per Canadian. So if you didn't think you were getting enough value for your $33, get ready to have that doubled. You're going to have to pay double the amount to promote the god-awful CBC, I guess, should the Liberals maintain their power. So at a news conference in Ottawa, Minister Pascal St-Onge, the Heritage Minister, proposed a plan to shield CBC funding from public accountability, locking it into legislation, bypassing budgetary oversight and political scrutiny. This is what a dictatorship looks like, folks. You cannot do this kind of thing. And the Trudeau government is just doing it on its way out. I'm so sick of this, because what they're going to do is they're going to ask Pierre Poilievre now, are you going to continue with this pledge to double the CBC? Of course, his answer is no. So then the whole election will be fought over the future of the CBC. Are we going to defund it and get rid of it, or are we going to double its budget? And it's impossible to have a fair and balanced press during an election campaign when one of the election issues is, will you fund the media company that most of the journalists work for? When you go to a typical news conference in any Canadian city, any political news conference, whether it be Ottawa or anywhere else, I'm telling you, the majority of the journalists in the room, in the press galleries, in the press conferences are government funded. In Ottawa, most of them work for the CBC, because you have CBC and you have French CBC. And so they just comprise a huge portion of the journalists out there. They make the questions completely biased. They form the narrative. They copy whatever the Liberals are talking about and ask those questions to Conservatives. And this is what continually pushes the completely biased media landscape in the country. It is so outrageous. It is so outrageous. This needs to stop. We don't want to have another election fought over whether or not the CBC will exist. I cannot wait. I hope Pierre Poilievre follows through on his pledge and just defunds it, cuts it off completely, no more. The Liberals, of course, will do everything they can to continue it. So let's show this clip, news conference in Ottawa. And here is Pascal St-Onge talking about how they're basically going to enforce the funding to the CBC and try to hide it from you.
The existence of our public broadcaster depends on a single line in the budget. I'm proposing that we remove the decision-making around funding from the political cycles, whether it's the elections or the budget. Many countries around the world have chosen that path in giving their public broadcaster predictable, viable, and stable funding.
Of course you would want to take it away from the political agenda, because your party is about to lose. Your ideology has failed us. We don't want to fund the CBC anymore. So on the very last week of your government, you're going to try to hide budget funding and ensure that it's not a political realm. No, you cannot do that. The same press conference, by the way, Pascal St-Onge announced that she wasn't seeking re-election. So she's a lame duck politician on her way out. You don't get to make huge billion-dollar announcements when you've already said you were going to resign, when you're not involved in the political discussion, when your government is heading into an election. Wait until after the election. Make these pledges during the election. If you win, you'll have a mandate. You shouldn't get to do this at the very, very end of your mandate. And I want to throw in the Fake News Friday bit here, because this is just so typical. Pierre Poilievre was also giving a press conference almost at the exact same time as this, when he was speaking in a grocery store. It was pretty amusing because he picked 5 journalists that would get to ask questions, or his team did, and they all happened to be from the independent press. So it's a little bit of taste of their own medicine, right? When it's the Trudeau government and the Liberals, they will absolutely refuse to speak to independent journalists. They'll go so far as to have our journalists arrested and charged with trespassing if they can, for the crime of trying to ask questions of their government and of their prime minister. Pierre Poilievre flips the script a little bit and says to the legacy media, no, you don't get to ask me questions. And they all light their hair on fire. You can see all the consternation and tears on X complaining about this. Well, hello, we've been going through this for the last decade, so spare me a little bit. But anyways, the CBC is playing this press conference of Pierre Poilievre. And Pierre Poilievre is on fire at this press conference. He's talking about, among many things, about how he's going to defund the CBC. So he's literally talking about how he's going to defund the CBC in this press conference. And what does the CBC do? They cut off Poilievre's press conference mid speech. He's doing Q&A with the reporters, and they cut him off to go to the Canadian Heritage Minister, Pascale St-Onge, so that she could deliver her nonsense, nothing announcement that hopefully won't even go through. I want to play this to you. This is just so typical of the CBC.
Artificially lower the deficits that people see reported, but that doesn't mean that Canadians won't have to pay the price. In fact,
they cut him off
by Canadian tax.
Okay, well, we want to take you from Toronto to Ottawa. As you can see, Minister Pascale St-Onge of Canadian.
So our friend, the Pleb reporter over there, pointing it out. And it's hilarious. Like they don't want to hear what Pierre Poilievre has to say. Pierre Poilievre is about to be in the race for prime minister, right? He's one of the people running for prime minister. He's the front runner right now. Whenever there's an election, he has a very good shot of being prime minister of the country. So which one, from a news perspective, which one's more important? The future prime minister, hopefully, God willing, or this nothing back heritage minister that nobody cares about, who's literally announcing that she's not seeking office and that she wants to double the CBC's budget. The CBC, of course, chooses the Liberal. That's just exactly what we're up against. It's so hilarious. And again, it's just completely typical. This shows you folks what we're up against, what the media landscape looks like, how the CBC can't even help themselves. They're so incredibly biased. Well, I really appreciate you tuning in on this Friday. I want to give a specific shout out to one of my favorite commenters on YouTube, Sheridan Forbes. He's always on the chat, always telling people to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel. I really appreciate it. Sheridan, thanks for being a super fan on YouTube. And to everyone watching, yes, please listen to Sheridan. Hit the like button, subscribe. If you're watching on X, don't forget to follow the account, share it so more people can see it. And if you're listening to the podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review. It really, really helps us out. Let us know what you think of Juno News. This is the second week since our launch. And, so far we brought great interviews. I had Danielle Smith on the show earlier. We had Pierre Poilievre last week. I caught up with Chris Sims, with Barbara Kay, with Professor David Haskell over at Wilfrid Laurier. We've got lots and lots more content for you. So let us know in the comments what you think. And we'll be back again on Monday with all of the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. God bless.